Most athletes don't fail because they lack talent, they fail because they waste it. Right now, you might be slowly killing your chances of ever going pro without even realizing it. I've worked with academy, top college, and professional athletes worldwide, helping them sharpen their mentality and perform at their highest level. And I've seen the same patterns over and over again. Athletes with all the skill in the world, but they're unknowingly sabotaging themselves. And when less than 1% of athletes actually make it, even the smallest habits can make or break an entire career. So in this video, I'll break down the 7 biggest signs that your pro dream is dying. Signs that you're probably not even aware of. So let's get started. Right, so picture this. It's game day. You've been waiting for this moment all week. You're pacing in the locker room, blasting your music and shouting your war cry mantras. The game kicks off and you come in flying. But just seconds in, you lunge into a reckless tackle. Whistle, red card, game over. You weren't unprepared, you weren't unmotivated, you were too hyped. Most athletes think that they need to be as pumped up as possible before a game. But the reality is, if your arousal levels are too high, then you're tense, erratic, and unable to think clearly. The Yerkes-Dodson law shows that peak performance happens in your optimal arousal zone. Not too low, but also not too high either. There's a literal sweet spot in the middle. The best athletes don't just get hyped, they dial in. They find their ideal level of intensity and control it. If you're constantly too wired before games, then you're just sabotaging yourself before the whistle even blows. So actually, most athletes need to bring their arousal down more than they think. You're already swimming in so much adrenaline for the performance ahead, and you're already climbing that high, and it's way too easy to then tip over the edge. So instead of hyping yourself up even further, you need to engage in things like listening to chill music, taking deep breaths, or using grounding self-talk. Because when you fall into the trap of over-arousal, you'll never get into that right state to fully lock in and perform at those peak levels needed to make it pro. But being locked in mentally isn't just about controlling your emotions before a game, it's also about what you do when you're not playing. A lot of athletes think that getting better just means training more on the field. But the truth is, as you climb the ranks, the biggest gains don't come from just playing more. They come from what you do off the field. Think about the pros. They're not just training for a couple of hours and then calling it a day. They're locked in on their nutrition, their recovery, their gym work, film study, and all their mental training. These things separate the ones who make it from the ones who fall short. And one of the most overlooked areas is game intelligence. If you can't scan, read the game, and make rapid decisions, then it doesn't matter how technical you are. And that's where Be Your Best comes in. I'm excited to have them as today's video sponsor. Be Your Best is a virtual reality training system designed to improve your scanning, vision, awareness, and decision making, the skills that truly separate elite players from everyone else. It's backed by scientific research and used by top pros like Odegaard and Chouameni, and with over 800 real-life scenarios taken straight from pro matches, you'll step into the game, make split-second decisions, and develop the cognitive speed that the top players have. And the best part is, there's no physical load. Because look, there's only so much training on the field that you can do each day to ensure that your body optimally recovers. But with Be Your Best, you can fit in those extra crucial off-field hours to work on parts of your game that most players just sleep on. Look, if you're serious about making it pro, you can't just train harder. You need to train smarter. And Be Your Best is by far the best option for doing so. It's something I recommend to all the aspiring pros that I work with. So to get you up and running, Be Your Best are offering you 20% off your first month or first full year if you use my link below. Okay, so next up, let's imagine it's the off season and a young striker is putting in the work. Every day he's out on the field, firing shot after shot at goal. Hundreds of reps, hours of effort. But when the season starts, he's still scuffing chances under pressure, still making the wrong runs, still struggling to convert when it matters. So what's the lesson here? Well, just because you're training doesn't mean you're learning. True progress doesn't just come from mindless repetition, it comes from what's known as deliberate practice. Studies consistently show that skill development isn't necessarily about how much time you spend, but how intentionally you spend that time. If you're not analyzing mistakes, adjusting techniques, and training under game realistic conditions, then you're not actually getting better. You're just reinforcing your bad habits. This is why the best players review film of their biomechanics. They hire one-to-one coaches and write out clear objectives for each training session to ensure that they're fully focused on technical specifics. Training hard is great, and of course you need to put in thousands of repetitions, but it's so easy for those to end up being thousands of wasted repetitions. We all know that guy or girl who seems to always be training, but they're never getting any better. And maybe that's you. And probably the reason why that is that your training is nowhere near as deliberate as it needs to be. So you need to ask yourself, are you actually learning? Or are you just going through the motions? Thinking deeply about your training is often harder than actually doing the training itself. So carve out some time every single day to work on this, otherwise you'll just stay in those never-ending performance plateaus. And how you think is also really at the heart of the next point. So recently I've been working with a midfielder who was struggling to make an impact in games. He had all the technical ability, the work ethic and the vision, but every time he got the ball in space, he hesitated. When we dug deeper, it became very clear. He wasn't stepping onto the pitch thinking that I'm going to make a difference today. Instead, his thoughts were, don't lose possession, don't give the ball away, don't mess this up. He was playing with an avoidance mindset. His entire focus was on preventing mistakes rather than creating opportunities. So we flipped it. We built a new approach goal. I play with intent to create, whether it's a forward pass, a through ball, or driving forward. Instead of trying to avoid mistakes, he was now actively looking to make things happen. And the shift was almost instant. He started playing with more freedom, making ambitious passes, driving the ball forward, and just contributing more to attacking play. So what's the lesson here? Most athletes focus on avoiding failure instead of actively pursuing success. They play not to make mistakes rather than playing to make an impact. The best don't just avoid errors. They seek to create, to push the game forward, to make those key passes, and to take risks. So be honest with yourself. Are you playing not to fail, or are you actually playing to dominate? And even if you play to dominate, it's very easy to fall into the next trap that can kill off your chances of making it pro. So one of the biggest misconceptions that athletes have about the journey to the top is thinking that it's a straight line. The truth? It's never that simple. I've worked with a lot of athletes in top academies or colleges who found themselves moving on to different clubs or transferring to different schools. Sometimes this is because they've gotten released, whereas other times they've left on their own accord. Some have been through 2 or even 3 different academies or schools. And that's the reality at the top level. It's extremely rare for anyone to have a perfect linear pathway. So look, you're a fool that you think if you get into academy or a top college program that you're firmly set on a clear pathway to the pro level. In fact, side steps or even step backs are often necessary to make it. You may have to transfer schools, change teams, or take some other brief detour before things start clicking for you. Every move, whether it feels like progress or not, is actually part of your process. Each experience teaches you something valuable and gets you closer to the athlete that you need to become. Expecting everything to unfold in a smooth straight line will set you up for disappointment. The road to success is often winding with detours and challenges that push you forward even when it feels like they're setbacks. It's all just part of the game. It's not about avoiding these bumps, it's about learning from them and trusting that you can stay on track even when things don't pan out initially. And this idea of really sticking things out despite so many obstacles is really at the heart of the next sign that an athlete either is or isn't going to make it pro. And that's the 99-1 mentality. This means that the most successful players can miss 99 shots in a row, but they still genuinely believe that they'll make the next one. They don't let one mistake or a series of mistakes define them. Why? Because they have unwavering belief in their abilities, regardless of the outcome. I've seen countless top players miss, fail, and get knocked down time after time, yet they never let it impact their confidence. They know that the results may not always go their way, and those results don't actually always reflect their true abilities. Those who are truly elite don't dwell on mistakes or accept that it's just a bad day. Instead, they keep demanding more from themselves, shifting their focus from the last shot to the next one. They keep the pressure on, they keep believing, and they keep pushing until the final whistle. They can have an absolute shocker for an entire game, but then still come up clutch in the final play. And that's because they have that 99-1 mentality. That sometimes you just need to be on it for 1% of a performance to get the result that you're looking for. But most athletes can see that it's not their day if a performance starts off a little shaky. They start playing in on themselves or start shying away, and that's obviously not going to help you achieve your pro dreams. And here's the thing. This itself is really the key sign that, at least in my opinion, reveals that you won't make it pro. That it's just a dream to you and you're comfortable with that. In other words, you just like the idea of being a pro athlete, but you don't have that deep desire to live that reality. Because look, it's super easy to dream about what it would like to be pro. The fame, the money, the status, the recognition. But the reality is often a lot less glamorous. For most pro athletes in the world, it's a pretty grim existence a lot of the time. The sacrifices are immense, the discipline required is relentless. You have to put in countless hours of work behind the scenes on the most mundane, repetitive routines that build greatness. And there's no guarantee that any of it pays off. In most other professions, there's more of a direct correlation between the level of effort that you put into it and the reward that you get out of it. But in professional sport, that really doesn't exist. You can train for months on end for a big competition, and for whatever reason on that day, your body is just slightly off and you put in a terrible shift. Or you can get yourself in the best physical shape possible for the season opener, and then you pick up an unfortunate freak injury that puts you out for 4 months. The reality is you can put so much of yourself into sport and get absolutely nothing back. So what am I really getting at here? Well, if you're only in love with the idea of being a pro, you're not ready for the reality. To make it, you have to fall in love with the process, the hard work, the setbacks, the sacrifices. You have to love this crazy reality of pushing yourself to the absolute limits every single day for years on end with no guarantee of success. And if you can't develop that love, then you'll never make it. Simple as that. So how do you ensure that you grow this love? Well, it's easier said than done. But to get you started, you should watch this video next.